Welcome back, everyone. Next up, we have Todos Medical Limited. It trades on the OTCQB under the symbol TOMDF and engineers life-saving diagnostic solutions for the early detection of a variety of cancers. Please welcome its CEO, Gerald Commissiong. Welcome back, Gerald. How are you doing today?
Doing well, thank you. And thanks for everyone who's joined, and thanks for the presenters for allowing us to present. I'm here to talk a little bit, update the market with regards to Todos Medical and what we've been doing. We are, as mentioned, obviously a cancer-focused company and Alzheimer's-focused company. We believe cancer and Alzheimer's share very similar mechanisms, just different cell types. In cancer, you're dealing with proliferative cells. In Alzheimer's, you're dealing with cells that can't divide. And so one undergoes division, the other undergoes attempts to create division and undergoes apoptosis, and that's the function of neurodegeneration. We've taken those findings and now are expanding some of that understanding as it relates to the immune system with regards to COVID, and that has become a big area of focus for us over the last couple of years. So here's the safe harbor statement. So just a little bit about the company, and we are going to talk about it in reverse in terms of what the focus has been historically versus what the focus is now. A little bit about us: we are a revenue-producing company. We sell services related to COVID testing. So we do PCR testing at our CLIA/CAP certified lab. We do antigen testing on site for patients. We do neutralizing antibody testing with the CPAS neutralizing antibody test at our lab. We also do general antibody testing for COVID. And we are in the midst of expanding that test menu to include areas outside of COVID, including UTI, STD, wound, cancer genetics, pharmacogenetics, as well as other tests that are needed. And we are in the process of putting together a long COVID panel to help monitor and potentially identify biomarkers associated with long COVID that could be impacted by therapeutic interventions. So that's a big area of focus for us. We also supply other labs with the necessary reagents and supplies needed to conduct COVID testing. And we've built about 7 different high-capacity, fully automated PCR labs in the last 2 years. But we've really focused now on expanding our own lab. And then finally, we may also make revenue by selling dietary supplement immune support products focused on 3-cell protease inhibition. And I'll talk a little bit more about that within the context of the other things that we're doing. We also have proprietary diagnostic technology, which was really the bedrock of the company prior to COVID. We have a blood test for breast cancer that we call Videssa. We have a blood test for Alzheimer's that we call Limpro. We also have both a blood version as well as really the CSF version, which is the assay that's most up and running, of an assay called MS Precise for the detection of multiple sclerosis using B cells in the CSF. And we also have a platform using spectroscopy to create immune fingerprint that we call Total Biochemical Infrared Analysis, developed out of Israel. And that is a pan-cancer, really pan-immune blood test where we can identify cancer in the tissue of origin. And we think we can expand that to other areas of biology. And then finally, we are developing therapeutics for COVID-19. We have a botanical drug candidate called Tolovir that has completed a randomized double-blind placebo-controlled clinical trial in hospitalized COVID-19 with very positive results. And we're in the middle of preparing regulatory submissions as well as preparing for phase 2/3 clinical studies. So a little bit about COVID, which is our primary market. As we all know, in the United States, there's a significant vaccination. So there's over 64% of the population at this point, these numbers are a little dated, is fully vaccinated. There's a little less than half of that are boosted. Worldwide, obviously, significant uptick in vaccination. The boosters primarily in advanced countries, but we know that the rollout needs to expand to other areas of the globe. However, despite this very significant vaccination campaign that has largely achieved its objectives, unfortunately, new variants that have overcome the virulence aspects of the existing vaccination campaign, i.e., they're able to overcome the immunity induced by vaccination, are able to expand the footprint of COVID and are continuing to ravage. So that COVID, there is an ongoing surge, and there is now just a tremendous diversity of new variants that are emerging with some fitness. Now it's a BA.2.12 that seems to be the most fit. That is really overtaking the United States. So there's a lot of variants going on of Omicron, and this is something we have to watch. And we also have to watch, of course, if something brand new comes out of left field as we emerge. And this really presents challenges for the vaccination strategy. As we look at who's at highest risk, obviously the oldest in the population who have the weakest immune system, just as a result of biological function. They're the ones that, really are at greatest risk. There are also a number of immune compromised people in the United States, and many people who do not know that they're immune compromised, who will find out as a result of getting COVID. That's, obviously a major area of risk. And the risk is not just associated with mortality, as has been, prophesized and proffered by public health officials. Now, an increasingly significant risk is long COVID. And, recently we're starting to see some interesting liver diseases in children that may be associated with COVID emerging. And so, it's really not, are you going to live or die? It's what kind of life will you have after you have COVID? And that, that's increasingly becoming the question, and is changing the mathematics and the calculations associated with the pandemic. As a result of that, therapeutics are becoming increasingly important. The challenges, of course, are antibodies are generally the spike protein and the spike mutates. And so, you may have an effective therapy for a little while, but the antibodies seem to mutate. The COVID seems to be mutating around the antibodies very effectively. And so now, the focus is really squarely on antivirals, and especially oral antivirals. And we heard yesterday from the administration in the United States that they're going to make a 3CL protease inhibitor Paxlovid more broadly available. Interestingly, we didn't hear that was going to be the case for molnupiravir, which is Merck's drug. And so it seems that the government is, betting on 3CL protease inhibitors to help stem the tide in the pandemic. And we believe that biologically that makes a lot of sense, and that's the right direction to go. So when you look at what that means in terms of the market size for both COVID and long COVID, long COVID really dwarfs COVID. And the question of whether, long COVID is triggering of the immune system, or whether it's viral persistence or some combination thereof, it's likely that there's a diversity. Many people fall into different buckets, and there will have to be multiple different treatments available for these people. And so that's, an area that is expanding in focus. The antiviral market in the acute setting was originally targeted at about $20 billion, a little more than that. Pfizer is expected to dominate that with their oral pill Paxlovid, which I'll talk about in a moment. Obviously, in the hospital setting, remdesivir is what is dominating at this point. Interestingly, yesterday also we heard the approval of remdesivir for pediatric patients based upon an open label study. And so, it's very clear that, the administration is moving beyond vaccination and is focusing on antivirals. And we think that that's a very shrewd decision because vaccines are not working to control this. And so, the moves need to be made that are being made. And, while caution needs to be used, we also have to use common sense. We need to kill the virus. And that's what our focus is here at Todos. So a little bit about what we're doing in that respect. We have formed a subsidiary called 3CL Pharma together with our joint venture partner, NLC Pharma. So we're the two shareholders in 3CL Pharma. We currently own 52% with an option to expand to 60% by adding a royalty to the transaction for the NLC shareholders. And so we have controlling interest in this entity, 3CL Pharma. And 3CL Pharma really does three things. We have a dietary supplement, Tolavid, and a subproduct called Tolavid Daily, where we have spent a considerable amount of time developing what we believe is a very strong, safe, and potentially widely available dietary supplement product to inhibit the 3CL protease. We think that this has very significant immune support functions associated with it, and can help support, i.e. bring your level of 3CL protease down if you have 3CL protease, as well as maintain either a low level, depending on your situation, or eliminate protease in your system. And so that's the function of the Tolavid and Tolavid Daily products, really focused on function of 3CL protease inhibition. And we've heard from clients that they're experiencing, very good outcomes for themselves, and they're happy with the Tolavid product. And so that, we're going to continue to look at that. And this morning we announced that we are opening up a market research study to get more information on how our clients are using it and the benefit that they're seeing, as that could guide our next steps. And I'll talk a little bit about that in a moment. We also have a botanical drug candidate targeting not just the 3CL protease, but the actual treatment of COVID-19 in the hospital setting, and that is Tolovir. And I'll talk about that. That is a dual mechanism 3CL protease inhibitor as well as anti-cytokine, and it has anti-inflammatory properties to it. And so that is really a therapeutic drug candidate, and that is our focus with regards to making treatment claims for COVID-19. And finally, something that we believe is going to be very significant, but we have not really been able to focus on it recently as a result of dedicating resources towards Tolavid and Tolovir, and that is Tolotest, which is to measure the 3CL protease. And we have completed clinical studies, which I'll share briefly. And we believe that this could be either as a standalone basis or as an adjunct to PCR and antigen testing to improve resolution, both on the front end, identifying patients earlier than antigen tests can because of the biology, as well as on the back end, identifying when someone is infectious and may be able to spread the virus versus someone who is below threshold and unlikely to have sufficient viable virions that are able to replicate to be able to infect another person. So talking about these areas, we first, of course, have to talk about the role of the 3CL protease. The 3CL protease is critical for coronavirus reproduction. It's a virally coded enzyme. It's required for not only replication, but also transmission. And that's a key aspect that I think many are overlooking. It is highly conserved across nidovirus coronaviruses, i.e. it does not mutate, which we believe is absolutely paramount when you're dealing with this type of coronavirus. You have to go after canonical sites that if they mutate, then they could really have damage to their biological function. And so this is one of the reasons why we think the 3CL protease is a great therapeutic target and why Pfizer made a good decision going after it. And it has unique cleavage sites. So really the role, if you think about it, the way the protease interacts with the virus enters the cell, it sets up shop, it overtakes, and the first thing it does is really pump out a lot of protease. The function of that protease is twofold: to allow the copies that the virus makes of itself, which are strung together in polyproteins, to be cleaved, so that you have individual proteins that are active that can then go out and infect other cells. So if you don't cleave these polyproteins into active proteins, they cannot go out and infect other cells, and you inhibit the ability of the virus to replicate in terms of more cells. So it may, whatever cells it has, it's able to take those over and make polyproteins. But if you minimize the ability to go infect other cells, you can control the spread. And I think that there's very important to understand that, we're sampling, most people are sampling the upper respiratory tract, but obviously the virus ends up in the brain, it ends up in the gut, it ends up in other organ tissues. And so, you're just seeing a snapshot of your mucosal tissue with the swab. You're not seeing what's really going on. And so, we have to look beyond just the superficial to understand what's happening. We think protease allows us to really do that. The other role that is critical is actually the protease. It goes out into the body and beyond just helping with replication. It also downregulates cell surface receptor called NF-kappa beta essential modulator, or NEMO. By downregulating NEMO, which is effectively the alarm system of cells, they cannot turn on their kind of local immune response. And as a result of that, the virus, kind of goes a little bit uninhibited and has a better ability to cause problems. The other thing NEMO does within the context of the endothelial cells, it damages them. And this is what we believe is causing the inability of oxygen to properly transfer from one side of the endothelial cell to the other, and is responsible for reduction in oxygen uptake. So we believe that this is essential, that this is absolutely critical to stimulate cellular immune response at the individual cellular level. And we also believe there's a role in a more general innate immune response, which we will be publishing on in the near future. The other aspect, of course, to COVID is the cytokine storm. And with relationship to Tolovir, we have very specific compounds that down-regulate cytokine activity, which we believe is a key aspect of why Tolovir has had success in the hospital setting. In terms of 3CL protease IC50 binding affinity, just a little bit on that. Tolovir is quite strong. It's sub micromolar, about 0.8 micromolar activity. Tolavid is in the 2 to 5 micromolar activity range. And so, you can get the concentrations needed to impact your protease levels based upon the consumption of Tolavid. And Tolavid daily, we know is nowhere near as good, but is much better than other products that people seem to be using nowadays, such as ivermectin. And so, if you're looking if you're looking at ivermectin as something you want to be taking, we believe that Tolavid daily is a much better, much safer option. With that said, Tolavid Max doesn't have any downsides as compared to daily, and is much stronger. And so one of the things we did was reduce pricing of the Max, because we've heard from a lot of potential customers that they're interested in that. And so we are focused there. So just a little bit about the history behind Tolavid. We acquired exclusive distribution rights to the supplement in 2020. We launched pre-market analysis with the Alchemist Kitchen, which is a expert herbal medicine shop in New York City. They provided us a lot of feedback as it related to how clients are feeling. And so, that allowed us to create new dosing, and we went out and got a number of new certificates of free sale from the FDA, where we added statements about 3CL protease inhibition. We got, significantly higher recommended dosing on the label, as well as different options for dosing, whether it's twice a day for maintenance or 12 times a day for support in terms of numbers of pills. So, that is something that we've done. We also know from anecdotal evidence that we've not seen, if someone goes over 12, we've not seen any pushback from a safety perspective. But of course, we remain open from all of our clients and customers to see if there's anything related to that. And that's one of the reasons we're launching this market research study to really confirm with data what we're seeing anecdotally. It is important to note that an observational clinical study was done with Tolavid in Israel in the hospital setting. We saw some good results, and these results helped us design and optimize Tolavir. So we saw a reduction in days in the hospital, obviously always a very significant reduction in mortality. We also saw a reduction in deterioration to need for mechanical ventilation, and we saw biomarker improvement. And so those things together are really what drove us to believe that we could create a product that could have, even better impact in the hospital setting. And that's what we did with Tolavir, which, is now completed a phase 2 and is now moving into phase 2/3. It's a botanical drug candidate with strong antiviral and anti-cytokine activities. There are 2 key compounds, a newly discovered 3CL protease inhibitor. There's a backstory to all that that you can watch in the LifeSci presentation with Dr. Dorita Rod explaining this. But this is quite important, these new discoveries, and we are doing a lot of work to do new discoveries, to optimize new compounds, new chemical entities that will eventually down the line replace Tolavir on a mass scale. And we've been able to understand the cytokine storm inhibitory activity of some of the other compounds in our mixture and have optimized and enhanced the concentration of those compounds to make sure that we have the activity of interest. So this combination, we think, of both antiviral and anti-cytokine is a critical aspect as why Tolavir is having benefit in the hospital setting. Just a little bit about the oral antiviral area. There are a number of new players, we've been hearing about Shionogi, Intana. Right now, we're in phase 2, we're preparing for phase 2/3 in the hospitalized setting. No other oral antiviral seem to be going after that other than Gilead, who's trying to turn remdesivir into an oral. So we believe we have significant advantages as it relates to the other ones. We have not gone after the outpatient setting with Tolavir. However, we're starting to get asked that question, both in an acute and in a chronic setting, and I'll talk about that in a moment. So just a little bit about the data related to the Tolavir double-blind placebo-controlled trial. We saw a 100% of patients achieved clinical improvement as measured by News2, so all 11 patients. There was 1 patient who deteriorated after drug was withdrawn. And this phenomenon is something that, is important and why we think treatment may be required for a longer period of time to have effect, longer than 10 days in that hospital setting. We saw a very significant reduction of time in the hospital, 40+% reduction of time in the hospital. We saw a significant reduction in time to clinical improvement as measured by News2. Obviously, there was a significant reduction in all-cause death, with the 1 death in the treatment group occurring significantly after treatment was withdrawn. And that's one of the reasons why we believe it's important to continue treatment, because there are emerging chronic aspects to COVID that people didn't originally think when we designed this study. There's a significant reduction in need for intubation. Again, that same patient was the one who ended up intubated. There was a significant reduction in need for supplemental oxygen. And if you needed supplemental oxygen, there was a significant reduction in the time on supplemental oxygen. And there was also improvement across all biomarkers. So this really gives us a lot of confidence in terms of how we're moving forward. And now, as we think about the next steps, we've achieved these primary endpoints, the secondary endpoints, the biomarker endpoints, and we did it at a very, very strong hospital, Shavi Zedek in Jerusalem. And so with Dr. Rocco, who's a tremendous PI, a great collaborator, and we now are looking to take this international as our next steps. So our regulatory strategy is to apply for EUAs based upon the phase 2 data, as well as if we can't get an EUA in a certain setting, then move to the pivotal phase 2/3, which we're planning. our strategy on our further clinical development in the hospitalized. Obviously now and increasingly, pediatric hospitalization is a problem. I think that's why we saw Gilead come out with that, because it's an emerging issue that we also think we can treat, given the natural aspects and the no significant treatment-related adverse events that we've seen with this and our mixtures. We also know that, moderate COVID, keeping people out of the hospital, is quite important, that are very sick, potentially compromised. So that's an area. And as I mentioned, pediatric, we think that in the outpatient setting, it's not likely that some of these drugs, oral antivirals, are going to be used in a pediatric setting. And we think natural is something that could be quite important as we go forward. So we were targeting an IND filing in Q1. Unfortunately, we missed that. We are now very close to the pre-IND meeting stage and moving to the IND in Q2. And we do think there are multiple regulatory paths in Greece with one of our partners, as well as in Israel. And so we are moving forward with all of those, and we'll have updates to the marketplace in short order. I know that people are quite anxious to see what will happen with Tolovir. In terms of long COVID, and I'll just touch on this because this is something that has emerged kind of out of nowhere for us, and really based upon a doctor who suspected viral persistence in a patient. There was an initial case study where there was full resolution of their long COVID symptoms with one course of treatment of Tolovir max strength. This was obviously, quite stunning to us, but as we looked into it, it made sense. And we've heard others that are now looking at Paxlovid within that context. And so that's something that we need to learn more about. But certainly viral persistence is going to be something that needs to be treated for a longer period of time. We do think that potentially opens up the market for our products, given that they're natural. And we don't see any kind of longer term or upper limit on dosing so far. And again, this is why we're going to be conducting some market research on Tolovir to really understand, what's happening out there in the universe and how people are using it. We also had an additional case study that was reported, and we now at this juncture have several that are in the process. Again, this was very, very fast, and people are kind of coming out of nowhere, but understandably, because they need help. And so as a result of that, we launched this market research study. We also are preparing to do a long COVID study with physicians. We want to see what the demand was, and it's quite impressive. And so, that is something that our teams are working on. We did get the market research study IRB waived. Obviously, we think the long COVID study will need an IRB. And so we're designing that right now, and we'll be submitting, and hopefully we'll be able to get that up and running in short order. And obviously, we believe if Tolovir have benefit, then, there's no reason to believe that Tolovir wouldn't. And so, while that's not a focus of Tolovir, Tolovir is an investigational product and not on the market. So we can't just launch a clinical study. We'd have to file an IND for it. So as part of the IND that we're looking for acute COVID in the hospital setting, we are going to start thinking about long COVID. However, it's really unclear what the biomarkers, what the endpoints the FDA is going to want to see. So, there's a lot of debate going on, and we hope to be part of that conversation. And hopefully we'll be in a position where we can make some progress in very short order, because we know the demand is huge. And then just briefly on Tolatest, it's a more comprehensive result and measures active disease versus, spike fragments. And obviously spike fragments, depending on the concentration of each and how it's measured. We know PCR testing quite well, but we know there are downsides to that. And so we will be moving forward with Tolatest as well, but the focus, we can't spread our resources too thin. Our focus is on Tolovir and Tolovir, but we do know Tolatest is critical because we think the 3-cell protease is becoming a much greater topic of conversation. And so we'll be moving that. That was really the main focus of today's presentation. I'll touch on the other aspects that are very important. As I mentioned, we are a revenue producing company. We did $5 million in 2020 total, and we did $12 million in 2021. We actually need to update the slide, so I apologize for that. We've built out a high-capacity PCR COVID testing lab. Upwards of 25,000 tests per day is our capacity. So we are expanding and looking to consolidate COVID testing in-house. And we think that, our ability and our interplay with long COVID could be quite important for that, because we do think long COVID patients are going to want to monitor, their PCR levels more closely than others. And if we add other complementary tests that long COVID patients are seeing have value in terms of monitoring, then we think that could be significant opportunity in addition to the other tests that I mentioned that we're bringing on. So the key is, of course, that we have high automation. So we can quickly bring on new assays, we can quickly bring them on and scale them, and that's really the key. We also have the CPAS neutralizing antibody test that is up and running, which we can do at scale. We think that needs to be something looked at much, much more closely in long COVID. Are long COVID patients' immune systems suppressed, and are they actually producing neutralizing antibodies, or are they only producing antibodies that are harmful, autoantibodies? Or are they producing useless antibodies, or are they producing no antibodies? These are all questions that need to be answered, and we think that having the ability to run these tests is critical. So we've already touched on our lab. We use a lot of TCANs, and so that's what we do. We also sell reagents, extraction, plastic, sample collection kits, rapid antigen tests, rapid antibody tests to other labs. Typically you would say, well, you don't want to compete with your own lab, but the market is just so huge. We don't look at it that way. And we initially built these channels up because everyone was having trouble accessing them. And so through building up those channels, we reduced our costs at Provista for running our own tests. And we're also able to provide menus that are important for other labs. And we think that this is something that, we can continue to do, which will not be competitive with Provista, and ultimately could also create a lot of reference work for Provista, depending on how we interface with our clients. And that's something that is important. And then finally, and this is where, Todos was before COVID, and where we still see huge potential, because 3CL will be spun off. We're 60% owners in it. 3CL will be spun off, and what will remain is the COVID testing, which is the revenue base, and then the proprietary testing line. The focus, I'm only going to touch on the Videssa breast cancer blood test. This is originally targeting BI-RADS 3, BI-RADS 4 women who have abnormal imaging. We are biologically, and I'll touch on the data here, biologically dense or non-dense is kind of irrelevant for the biomarkers that we're measuring. And so we are looking at other areas, women under 43 who are mammogram ineligible, and breast cancer survivors who want to monitor for potential recurrence. We think those are also other markets. And we have a 750 patient clinical study in Mexico that we will be getting underway in short order to facilitate the launch of the breast cancer test in early 2023 as a laboratory developed test. What we can talk about in terms of the data, we did our work here with some of the best labs, best universities in the world. And we think that this test could help reduce unneeded biopsies by a significant margin. And therefore, it's quite valuable. I won't get into Alzheimer's or the other assays that we have due to a lack of time. So I'll just touch on our management team. From the diagnostic side, Jorge Leon, as a senior executive at Quest for several years, he built up Quest Genomics. He's now really pushing the Videssa breast cancer test. He thinks it's the best test in the world. And we agree with him, obviously. And so that he's the key person to watch on Videssa, on the biology and clinical trials, et cetera. We brought on Philippe Goua as our chief commercial officer. He's got a tremendous background in terms of commercializing assays. He brought the troponin 9 cardiovascular assay to market and created the panel, red, yellow, green, to really monitor where people need to be evaluating their cardiovascular health and thinking about how they could intervene with supplements, obviously high quality supplements, and food and other behavioral changes that we know can have an impact on cardiovascular health. And so we think that experience is something that definitely within the context of cancer, especially early detection of cancer and things that could help, quite important. And then we have Dr. Paula Trapaz, who moved forward, brought Amyvid to market at Eli Lilly and believes in our Limpro test significantly. And obviously we have Dr. Dorit Arad, who's the Chief Technology Officer at 3CL Pharma, and she is the one leading all of the efforts as it relates to both Tolavit, Tolavir, and Tolatest on the scientific front. We obviously have a good support team, and we believe that we're in a really good position to be able to take things forward from a management perspective. So in summary, we've got an expanding revenue base. We did $5 million in 2020, $12 million in 2021. We expect to do $20 to $25 million in 2022 in testing revenue. Our dietary supplement sales are going up, and certainly some of these case studies and reports from others who are experiencing some benefit, we think will drive that. And one of the reasons we lowered the price, even though it might hurt our profit margins, we think it'll increase access, and we think that increasing access is really important now. And for two reasons. One, we think there's a lot of latent demand. Two, with that latent demand, we'll be able to engage with our clients and understand how our products are working for them, and that may give us some insights as to what to do in next steps. We are very open to strategic partnerships, and we believe we have pretty clear regulatory pathways for our products. So with that in mind, I'd like to thank everyone for listening, and I open the floor to questions.
Great job, Gerald. Always such a thorough, mind-blowing presentation. Let's jump into the questions. We got just a few minutes. Dennis Mammon and Dale Cooper say the shares have been dropping and there seems to be a disconnect between current valuation and the real value of the company. Could you comment on what you think is needed to bridge the gap?
We need to raise money and buy out the notes from 2020 that are problematic in terms of dilution. So that's the focus. We've been reinvesting all of the money we've been making into the research, and we're at this point we're cash flow neutral. So we can survive and we can continue, but it's quite clear the situation cannot continue as it is. So we are working on raising capital in a way that's not dilutive the way it is at these levels here. To be able to buy out that debt and then allow the shares to move up. So that's something that we've been working on. We're still working on it. Obviously, as we make fundamental progress, that's key. One of the things we have done is we've gotten valuation on the hospital setting of Tolavir, and it's quite significant. I think VERU, which is another company that had some data, although there's some controversy around the control group in their data set. The valuation is not controversial. It's quite significant. And so if we believe we have a better product than they have, and we can transact on 3CL Pharma outside the context of the Todos cap structure, we can create a lot of value. And so raising capital in preparation for that event, we think is possible, and that's the focus. And that's why we're getting the valuations, and we're focusing on areas where valuation could increase, and long COVID certainly is one of those areas. So we're making progress there, and hopefully we'll get that completed soon.
Thank you. Christina McKinney asks, how far away do you think you are from profitability?
We're cash flow neutral, and we think we're very close to profitability. We think, Philippe is going to drive a lot of business. He's bringing on salespeople with some deep connections, especially in the nursing home community. With what we're offering with COVID, with the comprehensive panel, and what we're putting together with long COVID, we think it's going to be a unique offering, which will allow us to win a lot of nursing home business. And so we're pretty close to launching that second set of panels. That'll be done in May. And then from there, long COVID, it's taking a little bit longer, of course, because there's just so much new information coming out. But hopefully we'll have that panel up in June. And then, the second half of the year will be quite significant for us. And so that's our focus on the testing side. Right now, we are profitable, obviously, with Tolavid. We're profitable enough to be able to drop the price by half and still, make significant margins. And so that's the focus. So, we've cut headcount in areas where we thought we had some fat. We brought on some expertise in areas where we needed it. So we think we're in a good place from a personnel perspective. And profitability, we're neutral now. We haven't raised any money in 2022 as of yet. So, we're obviously operating. And we think that, as we move to the next step in terms of increasing access to Tolavid and expanding our testing menu and revenue streams, that we can turn to profitability.
Great. David Core asks, when will your phase 2/3 Tolavir study start?
So the regulatory strategy, so I actually was in Greece not too long ago. The regulatory strategy is to file EUAs and then have the phase 2/3 ready to go. The reason why that's the case is because even if we file an EUA and you get it, there's not enough data for any government agency to support, kind of broad, unfettered use. What they're going to do is they're going to allow you to, move it forward, but require the phase 2/3. And so we have to align the regulatory and new information from other trials into the preparation of our phase 2/3, and that's what we've been doing. We do expect that once we complete the pre-IND meeting, we'll have a very clear idea from the FDA of exactly what they want. We'll be able to move from a trial synopsis to full protocol very, very rapidly. And then in parallel, of course, we're going to be engaging EMA to have that same discussion. And then we'll have to harmonize the feedback from both agencies to move forward. So hopefully June, July, the applications for EUA will be in. Maybe we'll have an EUA, maybe we won't. We'll see how long that takes, but the phase 2/3 will also be ready. But we don't intend to fund that phase 2/3 out of Todos. We're going to fund that based out of a spinoff of 3CL because we cannot take the dilution in Todos given the current market cap, et cetera. So we have some corporate stuff that we have to get done, but that is the plan. Hopefully June, July, we'll be able to start that phase 2/3.
All right. Last question because of time. Wesley J wants you to talk about how the 50% discount on Tolavid will affect your numbers.
Tolavid wasn't significant part of our numbers previously. We've done, I don't know, about $1.5 million in sales, maybe a little more total, but, it's picking up significantly. It picked up a lot during the Omicron surge and it's picking up again. Whether that's acute or long COVID related, we're not sure, but certainly seems to be why most people are buying our product. So we think it'll increase our sales significantly. As people become more aware and they hear not reports from us, but reports from people using the product, I think that, more and more people will try it and hopefully they have success.
Yeah, everyone loves a discount. All right, Gerald, we are out of time. Tons of questions still remain for you, but we'll send them to you privately so you can answer on your own. Thank you so much for joining us again on our conference.
Thank you.
All right, everyone, stay with us. We'll be right back.